Leadership without authority. Decision quality under pressure. When you don't own the room, when you don't have authority, when it's just your professionalism and your qualifications, not your position. Today is Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and I want to use this session very differently than what we usually talk about in high-level circles. Usually in high-level circles, we talk about how to do things. We even sometimes talk about what to do, why to do them. But we don't talk about who you are becoming. So I'm not going to use this session to talk about tactics. And I'm not going to use the session to talk about tools. I'm not going to use the session to talk about mechanics. And I'm not even going to use it to talk about strategy. I want to talk today about leadership. Specifically, the leadership that you display in environments where you do not have positional authority. Most of us in this community don't control the room. We don't control the platform. We don't control the algorithm. We don't control our clients' internal priorities. We don't control high levels developmental priorities. We don't control the timelines. And yet we're expected to make decisions. We're expected to provide high quality advice. We're still expected to act responsibly under pressure, even when we do not have positional authority. That is the kind of leadership I want to talk about today. Because leadership is often misunderstood as something that comes after success, after the title, after the team, after positional permission. But in reality, leadership usually shows up much earlier, when the pressure is high and authority is low. Here's the idea that I want to anchor today's conversation around. Leadership shows up when you take responsibility for the decision, not just the task. Leadership shows up when you take responsibility for the decision, not just the task. Leadership shows up when you take responsibility for the decision, not just for the task. So here's the idea that I want to anchor today's conversation around. Leadership shows up when you take responsibility for the decision, not just for the task. This distinction matters, especially in economic systems like ours. It is easy to do tasks. It's harder to own outcomes. It is easy to execute instructions. It's harder, much harder to say, I don't think this is the right move right now, and here's why. Most of the people in this group are some form of freelancer, GHLVA, solo operator, automation specialist, small business owner, solopreneurs. And they're already executing leadership more often than they realize. They're just doing it without the title, and often without recognizing that what they are doing is actually exercising leadership. And because there's no title attached, it's easy to confuse leadership with speed, or with responsiveness, or with always saying yes. Today isn't about telling you to slow down for the sake of slowing down. It's about understanding where slowing down is actually a leadership decision. It's about recognizing when patience isn't passivity, it's restraint. And restraint is one of the clearest signs of maturity. This is especially important in the moment where speed is rewarded publicly, shortcuts are celebrated, hacks are seen as normal, and AI and automation make it possible to act instantly, often without thinking first. So for the next few minutes, we're going to be talking about leadership without authority, patience as a strategic skill, and long-term thinking in systems that are constantly pushing for short-term action. No tools, no templates, no hacks, no tactics, just deliberately constrained and restrained judgment. Because leadership isn't about authority, it's about decision quality when you don't control the timeline or the room. So that is why on this day, we're talking about this topic. Leadership without authority results in decision quality under pressure. On this day, MLK Jr. Day, we're talking about leadership and how you demonstrate leadership even if you aren't the person with the authority in the room. Most of the frustration that people feel in marketing and sales doesn't come from bad tools or even bad scripts or even bad training. The frustrations come from reacting to pressure instead of choosing deliberately. Speed in our environment is rewarded with social feedback. Fast replies are praised. Thanks for the answer. Quick pivots look like intelligence. Oh, I was going down a wrong path. I see somebody else. I'm going to jump on your bandwagon. Momentum is often only visible motion. That's the issue. So we see a lot of momentum happening and we assume that it's motion in a positive direction. But often it's just motion for the sake of motion. Instead, we should pause before replying and check our facts. Loudness is often mistaken for leadership. However, strong opinions don't necessarily mean good judgment. Certainty often gets attention. This is the way it is, where nuance gets ignored. Well, you might want to consider people want certainty. Doing the mental work of evaluating the nuance is difficult. Algorithms amplify confidence, not correctness. If we confidently say the wrong thing, but we say it in a way that the algorithm recognizes as an answer, the algorithm acknowledges the answer rather than evaluating whether or not the answer is the right answer in that particular situation. Instead of being loud, practice asking clarifying questions instead of simply offering your solution as the solution. AI and automation will amplify action, but often not judgment. AI will shorten the distance between impulse and execution. The challenge is faster output often doesn't equal better decisions. With AI and automation, bad assumptions travel further and faster. Instead of giving an AI-generated answer, show your results, show your implementation of the recommendation given by the AI. Show rather than tell how to solve the problem. Public spaces often punish patience and reward reaction. Waiting, being silent, looks like weakness, and that silence gets filled by someone else's narrative. Thoughtful restraint is rarely visible. If someone is deliberately not responding, it's often not even noticed that they already are aware of and evaluating the situation. So instead of being silent and letting someone else's narrative enter the space and control the space, name the uncertainty instead of hiding it. Name the nuance. I think there's an issue here, but I don't know yet. Activity does not equal leadership. Being busy is not the same as being responsible. Visibility does not equal authority. Being seen is not the same as being trusted. If you're saying a lot of things and people don't trust you, you're just reinforcing the fact they don't trust you. So, back to the earlier comment, many of the frustrations in marketing and in sales aren't caused by bad tools, and they aren't caused by lack of effort. They come from reacting to pressure instead of choosing deliberately. This pressure is caused by the environment that we live in the 21st century, second quarter of the 21st century, not by anything that any of us is doing incorrectly. Leadership without positional authority. Leadership is not title. Leadership is not team size. Leadership is not permission. Those are managerial positions that have leadership responsibility. But people often occupy those positions without practicing leadership. John Maxwell says, leadership is influence, nothing more. If you're in the managerial position, you're in the managerial role, but you're not having influence on your team or the people that your team are supporting, you're not practicing leadership. If you're one of the team members and your influence is leading the team somewhere, despite what the manager is doing, you're the leader. Leadership is taking responsibility for decisions, anticipating consequences, and protecting standards. This is the kind of leadership that shows up when you don't outrank someone, but your judgment still shapes the outcomes. This is the kind of leadership that shapes decisions before the authority position even enters the equation. Most people in the high-level economic circle don't manage teams, don't set the platform rules, don't control these social media algorithms, and don't own the client's business. We are service providers using a set of tools to serve someone else. And yet, leadership still shows up. People like us lead by how we respond, what we say yes to, and what we delay to reevaluate and consider. Leaders in this environment are recognized by what they refuse to do, refusing bad fit clients, refusing rushed solutions, refusing unclear scope of project. And leaders in this environment are recognized by the standards that they model publicly. Their tone, their restraint, their consistency. Leaderships don't copy someone else's script and employ it in some other setting just because that script works. Leaders in this environment are asking, should we, before they ask, can we? Why should we do it? before how should we do it. Leadership shows up in restraint long before it shows up in results. Patience is a strategic skill. Yeah, that's good. Most people are skipping steps in the process, not because they're careless, but because they're capable, but they're under pressure. So what patience is not? Waiting indefinitely, indecisiveness, or even lack of ambition. What patience is choosing sequence, the series of actions in the sequence that is going to lead to sustainable outcomes. Patience is resisting false urgency. Patience is protecting the future outcome. So in practice, patience looks like holding sequence, not jumping to messaging and pushing scripts into a channel without clarity over what the offer is and who the audience is. Patience is holding sequence by not automating before understanding the situation, by not copying a script that AI generated without understanding the implications of the message contained in that script. Patience looks like resisting false urgency. We need leads now, but you need the right leads at the right stage in their buyer journey to turn into conversions. Everyone else is doing this. But does it make sense in your particular situation? Is it the right thing to do in your situation? Leadership and patience looks like staying consistent when nothing looks like it's working yet. When there's no applause, when there's no visible feedback loop, when you feel like you're just going through the motions, doing the things, leadership, which is based on we're doing the right things, we've done the analysis, we slowed down, like I talked about last week, to make the right decisions. Leadership is staying consistent even when it doesn't seem like it's working out. And next month, we're going to talk about leadership again from another angle. We're going to talk about leadership from the angle of authority. I talked earlier about managerial roles. We're going to look at leadership next week when authority is present and how it can be misused when we haven't done the sequencing as we talked about in the last couple sessions. So the reason that I have frameworks that I use in these presentations is to help us take up a mirror and look at our own behavior and see whether we're choosing the right things for the right reasons or whether we're simply copying someone else's model, someone else's framework, someone else's script. So the point of the 9-point marketing plan, which we've talked about a couple times in the last couple of weeks, is to protect sequence. It slows our decisions down before the outcomes of those decisions become expensive. It causes us to think in steps 1, 2, 3, the before, who are we talking to? What is our message? Where are they listening? Before they become expensive in the during steps 4, 5, 6, lead nurture, lead capture, lead nurture, and sales process, because we had the wrong audience. And so we're spending a lot of resources, whether it's cash for paid ads, whether it's effort for organic social media or content marketing, and we're attracting the wrong people. So we get into the sales conversation and we realize we're talking to the wrong person, and it's not a good fit on both sides. That's an expensive outcome because we got the 9-point marketing plan out of sequence. It's much more expensive to have 2, 3, 4, 5 people in a sales conversation and suddenly realize that we all have different agendas and we're wasting each other's time than to have never had started a conversation in a lead nurture step in the first place. The 9-point marketing plan slows decisions down before they become expensive in the lead nurture when expectations are being set that in the after the marketing, during the fulfillment, step 7, 8, and 9, the person comes into the setting, into the sale, buys the product, and has unrealistic expectations coming into step 7, the customer experience. If the planning, the befores 1, 2, 3, and the during 4, 5, 6 steps were skipped, it becomes very expensive in the fulfillment because unrealized expectations turn into chargebacks, cancellations, and negative reviews. In steps 8, you never follow up sales, never 0.8 lifetime value to the customer, negative reviews, no referrals in 0.9. Similarly, the 9 business model framework exists to protect fit. We're going to talk in the next couple months about how money is made by different entities or people or firms or agencies in the high-level space. And those agencies are sometimes freelancers or in VAs as an agency of one. Agency being someone who works on behalf of another. We're going to talk about how money is made by people in this sphere and the kind of pressure you live under each month when you're in those different business models. When people skip clarity around their business model, they experience pressure everywhere else, in messaging, in pricing, in sales, in delivery. Marketing pressure often isn't a marketing problem. It's the downstream effects of a business model or marketing plan model that was mismatched in the first place. It's more expensive downstream, and it's harder to fix downstream. Impatience can feel productive. Patience often feels invisible. Leadership lives in what no one is clapping for yet. Short-term systems reward reaction. Long-term, successful, stable, sustainable businesses are built by people who are willing to absorb pressure now and not pass it downstream to be dealt with later. You too can absorb the pressure that revolves around the high intensity ecosystem that is your high-level business by turning into slower decisions with clearer expectations, but better commitments executed more completely and more consistently. This is a reality of the environment we're operating in. The platforms are optimized for now. Clicks, replies, engagement, emotion, involvement. Sustainable businesses who survive later are based on trust, repeatability, and reputation. Long-term thinking does not look like slogans. It looks like patterns. Repeatable systems, not heroic effort. Repeatable systems, not constant reinvention and pivot. Long-term thinking are sustainable offers with realistic scope and clear expectations. Long-term thinking is about building an audience that trusts you over time. Familiarity that leads to predictability and credibility. This is why shortcuts, hacks, and borrowed certainty fail. It's not because they're immoral. It's not because they never work, because they do work. That's why they're the models that we follow. And it's not because they're inherently incomplete. But borrowing someone else's certainty means you have a system that is fragile. Your system will break under pressure. Your system will fail when conditions change. Fragile systems create cleanup work later. They reflect someone else's ideas, someone else's work, not the person that you uniquely are and your unique contributions to the environment. Leadership is not choosing what works fastest. It is choosing what is still going to work later. So I'm going to jump down to a little bit the admin part of today. And what we're focused on in quarter one is leadership and judgment. How you practice leadership, how you demonstrate judgment when you don't have the title. You don't have authority position in the room. When you're being asked to make decisions and you're asked to make them under time pressure. We've been talking about, especially the last couple of weeks, we talked about when and how to incorporate AI and automation into your offer so you can be confident. For the next few weeks, it's going to feel more tactical. We're going to slide down from this theoretical academic to an implementation level. But these things we're going to talk about for the next month or so are foundationally based on what I'm saying today. We're going to talk about why we're doing something and what we hope to achieve, because those are more significant layers of understanding than the what that we are doing. Yes, we are automating. Why are we automating? What do we hope to achieve by the automation? Yes, we're building a funnel. What do we hope to achieve with that funnel? And why are we building the funnel the way we're building it? And we're going to talk about how to apply these concepts in your business. It's going to be significantly more tactical in the next month to 2 months than it has been in the last half month to a month. To frame your thought process, February is going to focus on structure, how solo service businesses actually make money, especially when they're working entirely remotely. We're going to talk about why mismatched models create constant pressure, and you can alleviate that pressure by matching the models that you're following. We're going to talk about why the systems that we are implementing come after the leadership and judgment that I've focused on for the last couple of weeks. In March, we're going to shift toward communication. So really the step 2 and 3 of the 9-point marketing plan, and implementation 4 and 5. What we're going to say, how we're going to say it, where we're going to say it, and then implementation in steps 4 and 5. Lead capture, lead nurture. We're going to talk about how we nurture trust over time. We're going to talk about why messaging systems can fail when judgment is missing in how we implement the communication strategy. And we're going to talk about how consistency matters more than cleverness. In the short term, in the immediate, so you can get your head around around where we're going. Next week, we'll talk about sales funnels. And in February, the first Monday is the 2nd, we'll talk about the 9 business models framework, how you as a high-level business can really do make money, what the value you bring to the equation is, and why choosing the wrong model creates pressure for you everywhere else. In GHL Business Launch, Facebook is where we learn in public and we have these conversations. Our collab group is where we slow down and we apply this thinking in the context of your business. Here's the reality. Short-term systems reward reaction. Stable, profitable, sustainable businesses are built by people like you who are willing to absorb the pressure now instead of passing it downstream. So here's what leadership looks like from here. Taking what we talked about today, looking back at the couple weeks of preparation, the month or so leading up to today, and moving forward into the rest of first quarter and second quarter of 2026. Most of the pressure that people feel in these days isn't because they're doing something wrong. It isn't because they're doing something that is wrong, and there's a distinction there. The pressure most people are feeling is because they're being asked to decide faster than they're achieving clarity on what they should decide. Today's session isn't about tactics. It was about judgment. And it was about how judgment precedes systems. As we close, I want to bring this back to something practical still without turning it into tactics. Today wasn't about what to do next. That's what the next couple of weeks, next month or two is going to be about. Today was about how you decide what is next for you. We talked about leadership not as a position, but as a posture. Leadership when you don't control the room. Leadership when no one is watching. Leadership when the pressure to move fast is louder than the evidence to move carefully. Leadership is not authority. Leadership is not passivity. Patience is not passivity. Patience is not offloading your responsibility to an authority. And long-term thinking is not slow progress. It's deliberately shaped progress. Now, I'm coming back to this idea because it is central. Leadership shows up When you take responsibility for the decision, not only the task. And this is true whether you're building a website, writing copy, building automations, advising a client, or deciding for you which opportunities to say yes or no to. One of the hardest transitions that people make as they grow is letting go of the idea that leadership means doing more. In reality, leadership often means doing less, but doing it more deliberately. And this line matters, especially for people who are early in their journey. This is a shift that most people make as they mature, often without realizing it. It's just a natural course of maturing. It's not a criticism. It's not a hierarchy. It's not a judgment. It's simply how growth works. Early on, confidence, especially borrowed confidence, looks like a wide range of options are available. I can take any use case. I can make this work. I can solve any problem. Just tell me what to build. Later, mature confidence looks like discernment, knowing where something fits, knowing where it doesn't, knowing the downstream cost of saying yes too quickly. That's when patience stops feeling like waiting and starts feeling like leadership. That's why long-term thinking matters so much in a world that's optimized for reactions. Shortcuts aren't dangerous because they're immoral. Scripts and hacks aren't dangerous because they never work. They're dangerous because they're fragile. They do work well until they don't. The problem is when they break downstream. Where the cost is higher, the cost is harder to see, and it's even harder to fix. As we move forward through this quarter, we're going to keep building on this idea. Leadership first, judgment before systems, clarity before tools. Next session, we will move into how businesses actually make money in the high-level ecosphere. But importantly, why mismatched models? Well, rephrase. We're going to talk about how your business can make money, but how, if your model is mismatched for who you are, it will create pressure everywhere else in your life. And the reason is this only works if the foundation is solid. Today is about foundation. So if there's one thing to carry forward from today, it's this. Leadership rarely looks impressive in the moment. It always shows up in the outcome. Leadership isn't about control. Patience isn't about inaction. And long-term thinking isn't about moving slowly. These things are about making decisions now that you will not have to apologize for later. Thank you for spending part of your MLK day with me. I'm Keith Bashirs, and when you're ready to dig deeper, we have the private collab group. Until then, we'll be back here on Monday talking about sales funnels.